The grand hall of the Vakar Imperial Palace stretched out like a canyon, carved from black stone and silver metal. Jake Morrison stood near one of the towering pillars, watching the alien nobles move through the crowd like giants among children. Every single one of them stood at least 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in natural armor plating that looked like polished scales of dark green and bronze. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and when they spoke, their voices rumbled deep enough to feel in his chest. Jake was used to feeling small here. At 5'10", he was considered average height back on Earth, but on Vakara's prime, he barely reached the shoulders of most Vakar warriors. He wore the formal uniform of a Terran Confederation diplomat, dark blue with silver trim, but it felt thin and fragile compared to the ornate armor the Vakar wore even to social gatherings. He had been on this planet for 18 months now, serving as the human ambassador to the Vakar Empire. The assignment was supposed to be a great honor. The Vakar controlled over 40 star systems and commanded the respect of a dozen other species. Getting them to even acknowledge humanity as worthy of diplomatic relations had taken years of effort. But respect was a complicated thing among the Vakar. They valued strength above all else. Physical power, military might, the ability to dominate in combat. Humans in their eyes were soft creatures from a single world, barely worth noticing. Jake had heard the whispers and seen the looks. To most of the Vakar court, he was a curiosity at best, a joke at worst. All except one. Princess Zerakai entered the hall through the main archway, and conversations faltered as nobles turned to acknowledge her. She moved with the deadly grace of a born warrior, her armor gleaming like polished emeralds. She stood 7.5 feet tall with broader shoulders than any human athlete Jake had ever seen. Her face was angular and sharp, with the distinctive ridge crest that marked Vakar royalty running from her brow to the back of her skull. Jake felt his heart beat faster, just like it had every time he had seen her for the past year. It was irrational, he knew. She was an alien princess, third in line to rule an empire. He was a diplomat from a species most Vakar considered barely above primitive. But rationality had nothing to do with what he felt. Their eyes met across the hall. Zerakai's glowing amber gaze found him immediately, and something in her expression softened. She began moving through the crowd toward him, and Jake noticed how the other nobles watched with barely concealed disapproval. "Ambassador Morrison," Zerakai said when she reached him, her voice formal for the benefit of those listening, but there was warmth beneath the official tone. "Princess Zerakai," Jake replied with a slight bow. "You look ready for battle." "My father insists on full ceremony tonight," she said. "The treaty signing with the Kelvor delegation requires appropriate displays of strength." "Of course." Jake allowed himself a small smile. "Diplomacy through intimidation. You disapprove?" Zerakai asked, but her eyes held amusement. "I practice diplomacy through conversation," Jake said. "But I have learned that different cultures have different approaches. Your way works for your people, and this is why you are the only human who has earned any respect here," Zerakai said quietly, stepping slightly closer. "You seek to understand rather than judge." A massive Vakar noble walked past them, his armor decorated with combat medals. He glanced at Jake with obvious contempt before moving on without acknowledgement. Jake had gotten used to such treatment, but it still stung. "They will never see you as an equal," Zerakai said, her voice dropping lower. "You know this." "I know," Jake agreed. "But I did not come here expecting to be their equal. I came to build a bridge between our peoples." "And have you?" Zerakai challenged. "Built that bridge?" Jake met her eyes directly. "I have built something," he said carefully. "Though perhaps not what I originally intended." The air between them grew charged. They had been dancing around this for months now, ever since their first real conversation during a trade negotiation. Jake had impressed her with his knowledge of Vakar history and his strategic thinking. She had impressed him with her willingness to listen and her sharp intelligence that went far beyond the warrior culture she had been raised in. "Walk with me," Zerakai said suddenly. It was not quite a command, but close. Jake followed her out of the grand hall and into one of the palace gardens. The Vakar grew plants that looked like crystals mixed with organic matter, glowing faintly with bioluminescence. The garden was empty, as most Vakar had little interest in such peaceful places. Once they were alone, Zerakai's formal bearing dropped. "I spoke with my father yesterday," she said. "About you." Jake's stomach tightened. Should I be worried? That depends on your answer to a question, Zerakai said. She turned to face him fully, and in the garden's glow she looked both alien and beautiful. Do you feel what I feel, Jake Morrison? Or am I mistaken in what I have seen in your eyes these past months? Jake had prepared for difficult negotiations, for cultural misunderstandings, for political complications. He had not prepared for this moment of naked honesty from an alien princess. You are not mistaken, he said simply. I feel it too. Zerakai released a breath she had been holding. My people will not understand. They will say I dishonor myself by choosing someone they see as weak. They would be right about the weak part, Jake said with brutal honesty. By Vakar standards I am weak. I cannot match your strength or your natural armor. In a fair fight, any warrior in that hall could defeat me in seconds. And yet you do not seem ashamed, Zerakai observed. Should I be ashamed of being human? Jake asked. I am what I am. I have other strengths. I am good at reading people, at finding solutions others miss, at building connections across differences. Those are the gifts my species developed. The Vakar do not value such gifts highly, Zerakai warned. I know, Jake said. But you do, or we would not be having this conversation. Zerakai stepped closer and Jake had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. If I choose you, Jake Morrison, if I take you as my bonded mate according to Vakar tradition, your life will become much harder. The court will mock you openly. My family will see it as a scandal. Some may even challenge your right to stand beside me. Challenges I can handle, Jake said, though his heart was racing. The real question is whether you are willing to face what choosing me will cost you. I am third in line for the throne, Zerakai said. Far enough from power that my choice of mate should not matter much to anyone but me. And I have already decided, Jake Morrison. I decided months ago. I only needed to know if you had decided as well. Jake reached up and took her hand. It was enormous compared to his, capable of crushing stone, but her touch was gentle. I decided the first time you laughed at one of my terrible jokes about interstellar trade agreements, he said. I have been yours since then. Then it is settled, Zerakai said. We will announce our intention to bond at the next court gathering. Let them whisper and mock. I'm a warrior princess of the Vakar Empire. I choose whom I choose. As they stood together in the glowing garden, Jake felt both excitement and a deep sense of foreboding. He loved Zerakai, truly loved her in a way he had never expected to feel for anyone, let alone an alien warrior princess. But he also knew that the court's contempt was about to become much more personal and much more dangerous. He just did not know how dangerous yet. 2 years had passed since the bonding ceremony, and Jake still remembered every moment of that day. The Vakar traditions required the bonded pair to stand before the entire court, while their vows were witnessed by the emperor himself. Jake had stood beside Zerakai, barely reaching her shoulder, while whispers rippled through the assembled nobles like wind through tall grass. Some whispers had been cruel, others merely confused, but Zerakai had stood proud, her hand clasped with his, and she had declared her choice before her father and all the empire. Emperor Krovan had been silent for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying Jake with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Then he had given his blessing and the bond was sealed. Life since then had been complicated. Jake had moved into Zerakai's wing of the palace, a series of rooms built for someone 3 times his size. He had learned to navigate furniture designed for warriors who could bend steel with their bare hands. He had learned which court nobles would speak to him with basic courtesy, and which would turn away as if he did not exist. But he had also learned joy he never expected. Zerakai was brilliant and funny when away from the formal demands of court. She challenged him intellectually, debating strategy and philosophy late into the night. She was gentle with him in ways that shocked her own people, who valued strength over tenderness. And despite their vast physical differences, they had built something real together. Jake was working in his study when the alarm bells began ringing throughout the palace. The deep, mournful sound that meant only one thing. He was on his feet immediately, his heart pounding as he ran toward the royal chambers. The hallways were filled with rushing guards and panicked servants. Jake pushed through them, his smaller size actually an advantage for once as he slipped between armored bodies. He reached the Emperor's chamber just as Zerakai emerged, her face stricken. "My father is dead," she said, her voice hollow. "The wasting sickness took him an hour ago." Jake reached for her hand, squeezing it despite the guards and nobles watching. I am so sorry, he said. Sarakai squeezed back, then seemed to remember where they were. She straightened, pulling her emotions back behind the warrior's mask she wore in public. The succession begins now, she said. My brother Vorak is already gathering his supporters. My sister Talris will do the same. What about you? Jake asked quietly. I am third in line, Sarakai said. By tradition, I have as much right to claim the throne as either of them. But I am also the weakest candidate. You are not weak, Jake said firmly. In their eyes I am, Sarakai said. Because I chose you. Because I bound myself to a human who cannot fight as we fight, who cannot stand as an equal among warriors. They will say I have gone soft, that I prioritize personal feelings over duty. Before Jake could respond, a massive Vakar general approached them. High General Kresh was a living mountain of muscle and armor, decorated with scars from 100 battles. He barely glanced at Jake before addressing Sarakai. Princess, Kresh rumbled. Prince Vorak requests your presence in the council chamber. The High Council is convening to discuss the succession. I will be there shortly, Sarakai said. Kresh's eyes finally moved to Jake, and his expression held pure contempt. The council is for royalty only, human. You would be wise to return to your quarters. Ambassador Morrison is my bonded mate, Sarakai said, ice in her voice. He goes where I go. Then you both may hear what is decided, Kresh said. He turned and walked away, his armored footsteps echoing down the hall. The council chamber was a circular room with a high-domed ceiling. 12 members of the High Council sat in elevated seats around the perimeter, ancient Vakar whose combined age exceeded 1,000 years. In the center stood Prince Vorak and Princess Talris, Zarakai's older siblings. Vorak was 8 feet of pure warrior, his armor black as void and decorated with combat honors. He had led fleets in battle and personally killed enemies in single combat. He looked at Jake like someone might look at an insect. Talris was only slightly less imposing, 7 feet 6 with armor of deep purple. She had won 3 grand tournaments and commanded respect as both a warrior and a strategist. Her eyes on Jake were calculating rather than contemptuous, but no warmer. Sarakai entered with Jake beside her, and the room fell silent. One of the council elders, a female named Matriarch Vexala, spoke first. The Emperor is fallen, she said, her voice like grinding stone. 3 heirs remain. By ancient law, rarely invoked, we may call for the trial of ascension. The trial has not been used in 3 centuries, another council member said. Is it truly necessary? Prince Vorak and Princess Talris both claim right to the throne, Vexala said. Princess Sarakai, do you also make claim? All eyes turned to Sarakai. Jake felt her hand tighten almost imperceptibly. He knew what she was thinking. If she claimed the throne, she would be declaring herself ready to compete with her siblings in trials of strength and combat. Trials that would normally showcase her own considerable abilities. But 2 months ago, Sarakai had been wounded defending a colony world from raiders. The injuries had damaged nerves in her legs and arms. She was recovering, but slowly. She could walk and function normally, but in combat she would be at a severe disadvantage. Her reflexes were slower, her strength diminished. It would take at least a year to fully heal. I make claim, Sarakai said clearly. I am third in line, and I have right to the throne as much as my siblings. Murmurs rippled through the council. Vorak actually laughed, a sound like thunder. Sister, you are injured, he said. You would compete in the trial in your current state? That is suicide, not ambition. Perhaps she hopes to withdraw gracefully after the first challenge, Talris suggested, to maintain honor without actually competing. The trial of ascension requires each heir to demonstrate worthiness through combat, strategy, and leadership, Matriarch Vexala said. Each heir may compete personally or may choose a champion to represent them. This is ancient law. Then I choose a champion, Sarakai said. Who? Vorak demanded. Which of your guard captains will you trust with such a task? I choose my bonded mate, Sarakai said calmly. Jake Morrison will be my champion. The chamber exploded with noise. Council members shouted over each other. Vorak's laughter boomed even louder. Kresh, standing with Vorak's supporters, actually had to grip a pillar to stay upright. He was laughing so hard. The human? Vorak gasped between laughs. Sister, have you lost your mind along with your strength? He cannot fight. He cannot lead warriors. He is a diplomat who hides behind words because he lacks the power to fight. The law allows any champion to be chosen, Sarakai said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Do you contest my legal right, brother?" "I contest your sanity," Vorak shot back. "But by all means let your pet human compete. It will make the trial shorter. He will fall in the first challenge and you will be eliminated. Perhaps then you will remember your place." Jake had remained silent throughout the exchange, knowing that any words from him would only make things worse. But now he stepped forward slightly, meeting Vorak's eyes. "I accept the role of champion," Jake said quietly. His voice was steady despite the fear running through him. "I will fight for Princess Zerakai's right to the throne." Vorak stared at him, then shook his head. "You will die for her right to the throne, human. But I suppose that is love, is it not? Foolish and wasteful." "The trial will begin in 3 days," Matriarch Vexala declared. "Each champion will face single combat first, then strategic challenges, then tests of leadership. The champion who succeeds in the most challenges will win the throne for their heir. This is law. This is tradition." The council dismissed them, and Jake walked beside Zerakai back to their quarters. Neither spoke until they were alone behind sealed doors. Then Zerakai turned to him, and for the first time he saw real fear in her eyes. "What have I done?" she whispered. "Jake, you do not understand what you have agreed to. The combat trial is to the death or surrender. My brother's champion will be chosen to kill. Talrus will choose someone just as deadly. You are going to die because of me." Jake took her hands in his. "You asked me once if I felt what you felt," he said. "I do, and that means I fight for you. Not because I think I am as strong as them, but because you deserve a champion who will not give up." "Strength is not enough here," Zerakai said desperately. "Jake, I love you, but love does not stop blades or crush armor. You need to understand what you are facing." "Then teach me," Jake said simply. "We have 3 days. Teach me everything you can about how the Vakar fight. I will find a way." Zerakai looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 3 days is not enough time," she said. "But we will use every moment we have. If you are determined to do this, then I will prepare you as best I can." As they began planning through the night, Jake tried to ignore the voice in his head that said he was about to face warriors who could tear him apart with their bare hands. He tried to focus on the fact that humans had survived and thrived by being clever, by adapting, by finding advantages where none seemed to exist. He just hoped that would be enough. The arena was older than human spaceflight, carved from solid rock when the Vakar Empire was still young. Jake stood in the preparation chamber beneath the fighting ground, listening to the thunder of thousands of voices above. The entire court had come to watch, along with citizens from across the capital city. They wanted to see the human fail. Zerakai helped him secure the last piece of his custom armor. It was nothing like Vakar battle gear. Instead of heavy plating designed to absorb massive blows, Jake wore lightweight composite materials that Earth engineers had designed for human special forces. It would not stop a full-force strike from a Vakar warrior, but it would deflect glancing hits and give him mobility. "Remember what we practiced," Zerakai said, her hands checking each connection point on his armor. "Grath is powerful, but he fights in straight lines. Use the terrain. Keep moving. Do not try to match his strength, I know," Jake said. His mouth was dry, but his hands were steady. 3 days of training had not made him a warrior, but they had given him a plan. "Jake," Zerakai said quietly, "you can still withdraw. We can claim medical reasons. There is no shame in—" "Yes, there is," Jake interrupted gently. "In Vakar culture, withdrawal is surrender. And I did not come this far to surrender." The horn sounded echoing through the stone chambers. It was time. Jake walked up the tunnel toward the light, his 2 short blades hanging at his sides. They were earth-made weapons, lighter and sharper than anything the Vakar forged. The Vakar preferred heavy energy blades that could cut through armor. But such weapons would be useless to Jake. He needed speed, not power. The arena floor was bare stone with scattered pillars rising from the ground, remnants of some ancient architecture. The crowd noise hit Jake like a physical wave as he emerged. Thousands of Vakar, all standing and roaring their disapproval. He saw Vorak sitting in the royal box, grinning like he had already won. Talrus watched with cold calculation. Then Grath entered from the opposite side, and Jake felt his stomach drop. Commander Grath was 9 feet of solid muscle and natural armor. His body was covered in thick scales that gleamed like dark metal. He carried a massive energy blade that hummed with power, a weapon that could slice through a starship hull. His arms were as thick as Jake's torso. The combat master, an ancient warrior named Dexal, stood at the arena center. His voice boomed across the space without amplification. "Single combat between champions," he declared. "Fight until surrender, incapacitation, or death. Begin." Grath moved forward immediately, his blade raised. Jake ran. The crowd roared with laughter as Jake sprinted toward the nearest pillar. It looked like cowardice, like the human was fleeing before the fight even started. But Jake had studied this arena during his 3 days of preparation. He knew every pillar, every crack in the stone, every slight elevation change. Grath pursued, surprisingly fast for his size. He swung his blade in a wide arc that would have cut Jake in half if it connected. But Jake was already sliding beneath the blow, his smaller size allowing him to drop low and roll behind a pillar. The energy blade hit stone, sending chips flying. Grath turned and pressed his attack, driving forward with raw power. He swung again and again, each blow meant to end the fight immediately. Jake kept moving. He ducked, rolled, jumped, anything to stay ahead of that terrible blade. He was faster than Grath, and he used that speed ruthlessly. But he could not keep running forever. His lungs were already burning, and Grath showed no signs of tiring. The massive warrior cornered him against the arena wall. Grath's blade came down in an overhead strike that would crush Jake into the stone. At the last second, Jake threw himself to the side, and the blade buried itself in the rock. For just a moment, Grath had to pull it free. Jake attacked. He came in low and fast, his short blade aimed at the joint where Grath's armor plates met at the knee. It was a weak point Zerakai had shown him, a place where even Vakar armor had to allow movement. His blade sliced deep, and Grath roared in pain and fury. The big warrior backhanded Jake with his free arm, and despite his armor, the blow sent Jake flying across the arena floor. He hit hard, rolled, and forced himself back to his feet. Blood filled his mouth from a split lip, and his ribs screamed in protest. But Grath was limping now. The knee wound was not enough to stop him, but it slowed him down. The fight continued, brutal and desperate. Jake could not match Grath's power, so he did not try. Instead, he made Grath chase him, made him turn and pivot on that wounded knee. He struck quick and retreated again and again, targeting joints and weak points with the precision Zerakai had drilled into him. Grath landed more blows. Each one hurt worse than the last. Jake felt something crack in his left arm, and his vision blurred from a strike to his helmet. But he kept moving, kept fighting, kept thinking. He began to notice patterns. Grath always swung his blade from right to left. When he charged, he led with his left shoulder. When he turned, he favored his right side to protect his wounded knee. These were small things, predictable things. Humans evolved hunting animals much larger than themselves. They learned to see patterns, to exploit weaknesses, to survive through intelligence rather than strength. Jake let those ancient instincts take over. The crowd had stopped laughing. They watched in silence now, seeing something they had not expected. The human was still fighting, still standing, still adapting. Grath made his mistake 15 minutes into the fight. He charged with that predictable left shoulder lead, trying to pin Jake against a pillar. But Jake had been waiting for exactly this move. Instead of dodging sideways as he had done before, he dropped flat to the ground and rolled directly toward Grath's wounded knee. His blade flashed out, cutting deep into the already damaged joint. Grath's leg buckled. The massive warrior went down hard, his blade clattering from his grip. Jake was on him immediately, his blade at Grath's throat where the armor plates separated. "Yield," Jake gasped, barely able to speak through his exhaustion and pain. For a long moment, Grath did not move. The arena held its breath. Then the big warrior slowly raised his hand in the traditional gesture of surrender. "I yield," Grath rumbled. The silence that followed was absolute. Jake stepped back, nearly falling from exhaustion but forcing himself to stand. He had won. The human diplomat had defeated a Vakar combat champion. Then the arena erupted. Not all of it was cheers, but some of it was. Jake saw Vakar warriors on their feet, roaring approval not because they liked him, but because he had shown something they understood. He had fought with honor. He had not given up. Zerakai met him at the arena entrance, her eyes bright with tears she would never shed in public. "You did it," she whispered. "Jake, you actually did it." "One challenge down," Jake said, then his legs finally gave out. Zerakai caught him before he hit the ground. The second challenge came 2 days later, after Jake had spent 48 hours in a medical pod healing his broken bones and torn muscles. The strategic simulation was held in a different arena, this one filled with holographic displays and control stations. Each champion would command a simulated fleet in battle scenarios, scored on objectives achieved, casualties avoided, and strategic decisions made. This was more Jake's element than pure combat, but the pressure was just as intense. Vorak's champion went first, a decorated admiral named Kolthar, who had won actual fleet engagements. He chose aggressive tactics, overwhelming force applied directly to enemy positions. It was effective and earned him high scores from the judges. Talris competed personally in this challenge, her injuries not preventing her from commanding from a strategic position. She employed textbook Vakar tactics, strong formations, and coordinated strikes. Her score was even higher than Kolthar's. Then it was Jake's turn. The scenario placed him in command of a small defensive fleet against a larger attacking force. Standard Vakar tactics would call for meeting the attack head-on, trading casualties to prove strength and courage. Jake did not do that. Instead, he split his forces into smaller groups and used them to harass the enemy flanks. He employed feints and false retreats, drawing the larger enemy fleet into pursuing individual units. When they spread out to chase his ships, he regrouped and struck at their weakened center with concentrated force. The watching Vakar murmured in confusion. This was not how battles were fought. This was trickery, not honorable combat, but it worked. Jake's simulated fleet destroyed the enemy command ship while taking minimal casualties. His score was the highest of any champion. The human fights without honor, High General Kresh declared from his seat with the judges. These tactics are cowardly. The objective was to win the battle, Matriarch Vexilla said dryly. Ambassador Morrison achieved the objective with the fewest losses. The score stands. The third challenge was leadership, scheduled for the following week. Jake had time to recover and prepare, but he also had time to think about what was coming. Leading actual Vakar warriors, convincing them to follow a human's orders, might be the hardest challenge yet. But as he lay in bed that night with Zerakai beside him, he felt something he had not expected: hope. He had survived single combat. He had won the strategic challenge. Maybe, just maybe, he could actually do this. "They are starting to talk about you differently," Zerakai said in the darkness. "The younger warriors especially. They say you fight like nothing they have ever seen." "Because I fight like a human," Jake said, not trying to be a Vakar but using what humans are good at. "It is working," Zerakai said. "My brother is worried now. I can see it in how he watches you." "Good," Jake said, and despite everything he smiled. "Let him worry." Jake woke to silence, which was wrong. The palace was never silent, even in the deepest part of night. There were always guards walking their routes, servants preparing for the next day, the hum of environmental systems. But now he heard nothing at all. His eyes snapped open in the darkness of the bedroom. Beside him, Zerakai slept deeply, her breathing slow and steady. She had been exhausted from council meetings that ran late into the evening, dealing with challenges to the trial results from Vorak's supporters. Jake lay still, barely breathing, listening. There, the softest scrape of metal on stone, coming from the outer chamber. Someone was trying to be quiet, but not quiet enough. Humans evolved as hunters, and part of hunting was hearing prey trying to hide. He slipped out of bed without making a sound, grabbing the short blade he now kept on the nightstand. Zerakai had laughed when he started sleeping with a weapon nearby, but she had not argued. The palace was not as safe as it once seemed. Jake moved to the doorway between the bedroom and the main living area. The lights were off, but enough glow came through the windows from the city outside to cast shadows. 4 shapes moved through the room, heading toward the bedroom. They wore dark clothing and carried blades. Assassins. Jake's mind raced. He could wake Zerakai, but that would alert the intruders and they would rush in immediately. He could try to bar the door, but it would not hold against 4 Vakar warriors for long. Or he could do something they would not expect. He attacked first. Jake exploded through the doorway, his blade already moving toward the nearest assassin's throat. The element of surprise was total. The assassin barely had time to turn before Jake's blade found the weak point at his neck, the place where armor plates did not quite meet. The Vakar went down, his death gurgle alerting the others. They spun toward Jake, weapons rising. In the confined space of the quarters, their size was actually a disadvantage. They got in each other's way while Jake used furniture and pillars for cover, but there were 3 of them and 1 of him, and they were trained killers. Jake knew he could not win this fight through skill alone. He needed to survive long enough for help to arrive. He grabbed a decorative stone from a table and hurled it at the nearest assassin's face. It struck with a crack and the warrior stumbled back. Jake followed up, going low and driving his blade into the Vikar's gut where the armor was thinnest. 2 down, 2 to go. The bedroom door burst open and Zerakai emerged, roaring fury. She was injured and weakened, but she was still a warrior princess. She slammed into one of the remaining assassins with the force of a freight train, driving him into the wall hard enough to crack stone. That left 1 assassin for Jake, and this one was smart. He did not charge blindly. Instead, he circled, looking for an opening. Jake circled too, trying to position himself between the assassin and Zerakai. The Vikar feinted left, then struck right. Jake barely blocked the blow, his smaller blade catching the assassin's weapon but nearly getting knocked from his grip. The force of the impact sent pain shooting up his arm. The assassin pressed his advantage, striking again and again with brutal efficiency. Jake gave ground, unable to match the strength behind each blow. His back hit the wall. There was nowhere left to run. The assassin raised his blade for a killing strike. Jake did the only thing he could think of. He threw his own blade directly at the Vikar's face. It was not a throwing knife, not designed for that kind of attack. But the assassin instinctively jerked his head back, and that moment of distraction was enough. Jake lunged forward, inside the reach of the longer blade, and slammed his fist into the assassin's throat. It should not have worked. His fist should have just bounced off Vikar armor. But there was a reason humans developed closed fists while most species did not. Concentrated force on a small impact point driven by desperation and adrenaline could do surprising damage. The assassin staggered, choking. Jake grabbed the fallen blade from the first assassin he had killed and drove it upward under the choking Vikar's chin. Silence fell again. 4 assassins lay dead. Jake and Zerakai stood among the bodies, both breathing hard. Then the door burst open again and palace guards flooded in. Too late to help, but in time to see the aftermath. By dawn, the interrogation had produced results. 1 assassin had survived long enough to be questioned, and under pressure from matriarch Vexala herself, he confessed. High General Kresh had ordered the assassination, hoping to eliminate Jake and force Zerakai to withdraw from the trial. Did Prince Vorak know? Zerakai demanded in the emergency council session. The assassin claims Kresh acted alone, Vexala said carefully. He says the prince was not informed of the plan. How convenient, Jake said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He rarely spoke in council sessions, knowing his voice carried little weight. But now his voice was hard. Kresh is Vorak's closest supporter. He has served him for 20 years. Are we really supposed to believe he ordered my assassination without his prince's knowledge? Careful, human, Vorak growled from his seat. You accuse me of dishonor without proof. I accuse Kresh of dishonor with absolute proof, Jake said, meeting Vorak's eyes. What you knew or did not know, I cannot say. But your general tried to have me murdered rather than face me in honorable competition. What does that say about your supporters' faith in your strength? The chamber fell silent. It was a dangerous thing to say, implying that Vorak's people thought he needed help to win. But it was also true, and everyone knew it. General Kresh will be executed for dishonor, Vexala declared. Prince Vorak, you are not disqualified as we have no direct evidence of your involvement, but your supporters' actions have brought shame to your claim. 3 days later, Jake stood before the 4th challenge. The leadership trial required each champion to command a unit of actual Vikar soldiers through a simulated combat scenario. The soldiers were chosen randomly and had to obey their assigned commander absolutely. Jake's unit consisted of 20 Vikar warriors, all veterans with multiple combat deployments. They stood at attention as he approached, but he could see the doubt in their eyes. They had heard about his victories, but they still saw a small human who should not be giving them orders. I am Jake Morrison, he said simply. For the next 6 hours, I am your commander for this exercise. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that I am too small, too weak, too human to understand how real warriors fight. Some of the Vikar shifted uncomfortably. Others stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge his words. You are right, Jake continued. I do not fight like you fight. I cannot match your strength or your natural armor. But I have something else. I have survived 2 challenges by using what I am good at, not by trying to be what I am not. And today I am going to use what you are good at to win this challenge. He paused, making eye contact with each warrior. I have read your service records.
All 20 of you.
Sergeant Calrex, you have expertise in urban combat. Corporal Dren, you are a specialist in heavy weapons. Private Nix, you have more close-quarters combat experience than anyone in your battalion. He went through the entire unit, naming each warrior and acknowledging their specific skills. He could see surprise in their eyes now. No one had expected the human to do his homework. I am not here to make you fight like humans, Jake said. I'm here to use your skills effectively. That is what good leadership means. Not forcing everyone to follow one path, but recognizing what each warrior brings to the battle and using it well. The exercise began. They were tasked with taking a fortified position held by an opposing force. Standard tactics would be a frontal assault, proving courage and strength. Jake's veterans waited for those orders. Sergeant Calrex, take your urban combat specialists and find us 3 alternate routes into that facility. Jake ordered instead. Corporal Dren, I want your heavy weapons team on that ridge with clear firing lanes. The rest of you, we are going to coordinate 3 simultaneous strikes from different angles. For a moment, no one moved. Then Calrex, the senior soldier, nodded slowly. Understood, Commander. The unit split and moved with practiced efficiency. Jake coordinated their movements using their experience and his strategic mind to create a plan that played to their strengths. He listened when they had suggestions, adjusting the plan based on their knowledge of tactics and terrain. The attack went perfectly. 3 strike teams hit the fortified position simultaneously, from unexpected angles while heavy weapons suppressed the defenders. They achieved the objective in half the expected time with 0 casualties. After the exercise, Sergeant Calrex approached Jake. Commander Morrison, he said formally, that was good leadership. You treated us like warriors, not like tools. You are warriors, Jake said simply. I would be a fool not to recognize that. The scoring judges gave Jake the highest marks in the leadership challenge. But more importantly, his 20 Vakar soldiers carried him from the field on their shoulders, chanting his name. It was a warrior's honor, given only to commanders who earned true respect. In the royal box, Vorak watched with barely concealed fury. Talrus had withdrawn from the competition after the leadership challenge, recognizing she could not win. Only 2 champions remained, Vorak and Jake. It comes down to final combat, Vorak announced. Champion against champion. Me against the human. No more games. No more tricks. Just pure strength and warrior skill. Jake met his eyes across the arena. I accept. You should not, Zerakai said quietly that night. Jake, Vorak is the greatest living warrior in the Empire. He has never lost a fight. He will kill you. Maybe, Jake agreed, but I have surprised everyone so far. Why stop now? Because this is different, Zerakai insisted. The other challenges played to your strengths. This final combat is pure Vakar tradition, strength against strength, blade against blade. You cannot adapt your way out of this. Then I will find another way, Jake said. I always do. But as he lay awake that night, he wondered if this time, finding another way would be enough. Dawn broke red over Vakari's prime, and Jake stood on the balcony of his quarters watching the city wake. In 3 hours, he would face Prince Vorak in the final combat. The winner would claim the throne for their heir. The loser would likely die. He heard Zerakai approaching before she spoke. After 2 years together, he knew her footsteps, the particular way she moved even when trying to be quiet. You should be resting, she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Could not sleep, Jake admitted. Too much thinking. About the fight. About everything. He turned to face her, taking in her face in the early morning light. Zerakai, if I do not survive this, I need you to know something. These 2 years with you have been the best of my life. I do not regret any of it. Stop talking like you have already lost, Zerakai said, but her voice cracked slightly. You have won every challenge so far. You have done things no one thought possible. This is different, Jake said. Vorak is not like the others. He has fought in real wars. He has killed enemies in single combat dozens of times. And I have fought in exactly 4 real fights in my entire life, all of them in the last few weeks. Then why do this? Zerakai asked, her eyes bright. Why not surrender? We can leave, go back to Earth, build a life there. I do not need a throne if it costs me you. Jake smiled and touched her face gently. You know why. Because you deserve that throne. Because you will be a better empress than your brother could ever be an emperor. and because someone needs to show the Vakar Empire that strength comes in many forms. Jake, besides, Jake interrupted with a slight grin, I have a plan. The grand arena was filled beyond capacity. Every noble in the Empire had come to witness this historic moment. The human champion who had shocked everyone by surviving this far would face the greatest warrior of the age. Most expected it to be over quickly. Jake entered from the south gate and the crowd noise was mixed. Some jeered and mocked. But others, particularly younger warriors and those from the lower ranks, cheered. They had seen him fight. They had seen him lead. They had seen him refuse to quit despite overwhelming odds. Vorak entered from the north gate and the roar was deafening. He stood 8 feet tall in ornate black armor, carrying a massive blade that glowed with power. He was a legend made flesh and he moved with absolute confidence. Combat Master Dexal stood at the arena center.
Final combat of the Trial of Ascension, his voice boomed.
Champion Vorak of the Royal Blood versus Champion Jake Morrison, representing Princess Zerakai. This combat is to first blood under traditional law. The rules are simple. Fight with honor. Fight with courage. Begin. Vorak moved forward immediately, not charging but walking with deliberate menace. I will try to make this quick, human, he called out. You have earned that much respect. I appreciate that, Jake called back. But I think it is going to take a while. Vorak's first strike came like lightning. His blade moved in a perfect arc meant to take Jake's head off in one clean blow. But Jake was not there. He had already ducked and rolled to the side, coming up with his twin short blades ready. The fight began in earnest. Vorak was everything Jake feared. Fast despite his size, skilled beyond measure, and strong enough to shatter stone with each blow. His technique was flawless, honed over decades of constant training and real combat. But Jake had something Vorak did not expect. He had spent the last 3 days studying every recording of Vorak's previous fights. He had watched the prince's tournament victories, his combat demonstrations, every piece of footage available. And he had noticed something. Vorak always finished fights the same way. Once he had an opponent hurt and retreating, he would unleash a specific combination of 3 strikes. Blade high, blade low, then a devastating thrust to the center. It was his signature move, practiced 10,000 times until it was muscle memory. Jake knew he could not win by being better. He had to win by being smarter. So he let himself be hurt. He took a glancing blow to his shoulder that sent pain shooting through his arm. He stumbled back, favoring his left side, making it look worse than it was. He kept retreating, letting Vorak press the attack. The crowd roared, sensing the end. Even Vorak seemed to relax slightly, seeing victory in sight. Jake continued to fall back, bleeding from several cuts, his breathing ragged. Then Vorak shifted into his finishing combination. Blade high, exactly as Jake had studied. Jake ducked it. Blade low, sweeping for his legs. Jake jumped, barely clearing it. And then the thrust to the center, the killing blow. Jake did not dodge. Instead, he caught the blade with both hands, letting it cut deep into his palms. The pain was incredible, white-hot and overwhelming, but he held on, using his grip to pull himself forward along the blade's length, getting inside Vorak's reach. Vorak's eyes widened in shock. No one did this. No one was insane enough to grab a blade with bare hands. But humans were persistence hunters who could push through pain that would stop other species. Humans could hurt themselves if it meant hurting their prey worse. Jake drove his forehead directly into Vorak's face with every ounce of strength in his body. The headbutt was a human fighting technique, using the hardest part of the skull as a weapon. It stunned Vorak, who had never encountered such a move. Before the prince could recover, Jake followed with a knee strike to Vorak's gut, right where the armor plates separated. Then he twisted, using Vorak's own grip on his weapon to unbalance the massive warrior. Vorak went down, not knocked out, not defeated, but down on one knee, dazed and off balance. Jake stood over him, his hands bleeding heavily but his eyes clear. He could strike now, could draw first blood and win. The crowd waited, silent with shock. Instead, Jake stepped back and extended his hand to help Vorak up. Get up, Jake said quietly. This is not how it should end. Vorak stared at the offered hand, confusion clear on his face. Then slowly his expression changed. He looked at Jake, really looked at him, and saw something he had not seen before. Not weakness, not luck, but a different kind of strength. You could win right now, Vorak said. Why offer mercy? Because you are a great warrior, Jake said. You deserve to yield with honor, not be defeated through a desperate trick. And because maybe it is time we both recognize that there are different ways to be strong. Vorak stared for a moment longer. Then he raised his hand in the traditional gesture of yielding. I yield, he said clearly. The human has defeated me. Fairly and with honor. The arena exploded, not with mockery now, but with genuine shock and amazement. Jake Morrison, the human diplomat, had won the trial of ascension. Combat Master Dexal stepped forward, his ancient voice cutting through the noise. Champion Jake Morrison is victorious. Princess Zerakai has won the right to the throne. The coronation ceremony took place the following week. Zerakai stood before the High Council, receiving the imperial crown of the Vakar Empire. She was now Empress Zerakai, ruler of 40 star systems and billions of lives. In her first official act, she named Jake Morrison as her prince consort and chief imperial strategist. The court had no choice but to accept it. He had proven himself in every way that mattered to Vakar culture, but more than that, things began to change. The younger warriors started training in new techniques, combining traditional Vakar strength with the adaptability Jake had shown. Other species within the empire who had been treated as lesser began to receive more respect. Embassies from minor species requested audiences, seeing hope for the first time. Jake stood beside Zerakai on the throne room balcony as crowds celebrated below. She wore the imperial crown and armor of state. He wore formal diplomatic attire that had been adjusted to include some Vakar elements, a symbol of two worlds coming together. I was wrong about you, Zerakai said quietly, meant only for his ears. When we met, I saw your intelligence and your heart. But I did not see your strength. I thought you were weak because you were different from us. I am different from you, Jake said. That was always true. I am still not as strong as any Vakar warrior. I cannot match your natural advantages. But you are strong in your own way, Zerakai continued. You taught me that strength is not just about how hard you can hit. It is about how you face challenges. How you adapt, how you refuse to give up even when everything says you should. You taught me something too, Jake said. You taught me that I am stronger than I thought I was. I spent my whole life using diplomacy and words because I assumed I could not fight. But when I had to fight, when I had something worth fighting for, I found capabilities I did not know I had. We made each other better, Zerakai said. Yes, Jake agreed. That is what love does. Below them, the crowds chanted Zerakai's name. But mixed in with it, Jake heard something else. His name too, being chanted by Vakar warriors who had learned to respect him. Not because he became like them, but because he remained himself and proved that was enough. In the royal box, Vorak watched the celebration. Talrus stood beside him. Neither had been punished for their roles in the trial. Zerakai had offered them positions in her new government, recognizing that the empire needed unity more than revenge. He is not what I expected, Vorak said quietly. None of them are, Talrus replied. The humans. We thought they were weak because they are small and soft. We did not realize they are strong in ways we never developed. The empire is changing, Vorak observed. Yes, Talrus agreed. And maybe that is not a bad thing. 6 months later, the first class of cross-species warriors graduated from the Imperial War Academy. Humans trained alongside Vakar, each learning from the other's strengths. The age of Vakar supremacy was ending, not through conquest or collapse, but through evolution. And at the center of it all stood Empress Zerakai and Prince Consort Jake Morrison, the alien princess and the human diplomat who proved that love could bridge any divide, and that strength came in infinite forms. The story spread across the galaxy, the human who fought for his alien wife's crown, and won not through being stronger but through being smarter, more adaptable, and refusing to give up. It became a legend, told and retold, inspiring others to look beyond surface appearances and traditional assumptions, because in the end, Jake Morrison taught the Vakar Empire the most important lesson of all. That being different was not the same as being weak. That adaptation was stronger than tradition, and that sometimes the greatest warriors were the ones who fought not with overwhelming force but with courage, intelligence, and love. The alien princess had thought her human husband was weak. She learned she was wrong, and in learning that lesson, she helped an entire empire learn it too.